Hi, nice seeing you.
Hi, Henry.
Thank you for presenting today.
Oh, my pleasure. Just let
Yeah,
me know when you want me to start. Yeah.
yeah, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes, like till 1:05, and then we can get going.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining again to another session. Today we have Ee Tay. She's joining us from NYU today. So thank you again, Ee, for presenting, and you can take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Henry. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. We're going to talk about ultrasound hacks and different various do-it-yourself kind of a thing that we can do in the ultrasound world to really enhance our education for our fellows and residents who we are teaching. So. And this is very informal, so please feel free to ask any questions. I can't see chat, but if you want to interrupt me, or perhaps that Henry can coordinate from any other chat boxes. Okay. So anything that's really do it yourself. We try to enhance our education in many ways, and especially during the time of COVID, so we can't really touch anybody. At that time to really do some of our education, to really try to fulfill the education for ultrasound. We really had to be creative. And this is when some of these hacks, I would say, could be useful during this time. So the objective of this particular lecture is to really for us to evaluate one of the alternatives for ultrasounding patients that we can use so that if we ever encounter some of these, such as COVID or any type of events that we're not able to have patient contact when we're doing ultrasound education, or even alternatives for patient education, patient contacts. And it is can be a cost-saving event. Some of these models can be pretty expensive. And so these are some of the alternatives that we can use. And it can be great for learning if you're in a resource limited environment, such as if you're doing some of the overseas work. You can maintain education without having continue the education for some of the residents in the and we can try to compare the image qualities between a patient as well as some of these phantoms that we'll be seeing, and to really get you into some creative thinking of what can you do to really try to create some of these models that can mimic what a real life person can also can be, but without the access of one. So. Okay, so ultrasound phantoms, as you all know, are made of synthetic materials that can mimic your body. So in this particular case that we're seeing right now is for vascular access. And so we're all pretty much familiar with these. So they do come in different types of phantoms. So you have ones that look at the spinal cords. You have ones that look at your thyroid, especially if you're doing biopsies for thyroids, probably not in our field so much, but these are phantoms for that. GYN, we do it in our institution. We have these models that we can look for pathology or pregnancy or cysts and whatnot. And then that is somehow, that is often incorporated with the simulation that we have in our institutions, and I'm sure in yours too. And here on the right is also for vascular access. Okay, so the phantoms can actually be pretty expensive. One block of this can be upwards of over $500, and they are reusable to some extent, but eventually you'll see these tracks that can occur, so you know exactly where the vasculatures are. So it can almost be a little bit cheating a little bit. You can refresh these, but these can only go so far, and then you just spend another $550 on something like this. So how do you make your own phantoms? I think we've all done it at some point or have seen it done. Some of the most common thing that we use for vascular access, we actually just use these phantoms that's made mostly from jello type material. So one of the great things about Metamucil, other than to make you regular, is to actually make phantoms out of them. And see, these are some of the equipments that you can utilize for phantom making. And so what this particular guy did was he took like balloons, just long balloons that you make balloon animals out of, and inflated them and tied them on each side and inserted them through Tupperware. He mixed the recipe between with the Metamucil and the jello ingredients, and then poured it over where his Tupperware and over what he would call the vascular for vasculature, such as the animal balloons. And then you'll see here, once it hardens, it actually looks like the one picture on the right side. Okay. So what you can do is that these are reusable, and they do also leave tracks too, but it is a cheaper way of doing it. It is just time consuming that you have to make it. It doesn't last very long. After a few days, it starts to mold if you don't take good care of it. So it becomes a little nasty after a while, but it is one way for you to make a phantom. And this particular one is actually opaque and white, and I can totally see where the veins are. So I don't know if I would do white, but the black one is pretty good. So the image quality is actually not so bad. So this is the image from the previous attempts. And so you can actually press on it, they compress. It looks like regular veins, and then you can actually access them with the puncture, so that we recommend using balloons or pin rows, something that is a little bit more pliable. If you do anything harder, you may not necessarily try to get that puncture, the same simulation as you would in a regular vein. So some people got really creative. They thought, well, let's make this a challenge. This is, I think, Lorraine Ng's group over at St. Luke's at one point. They decided that they were going to make abscesses. So they took a balloon and they filled it with pudding, and they glued it with cement glue at the bottom of the basin, and then they poured basically the jello Metamucil combination over it so that they can mimic an abscess. And this is what they got. I guess they really like the cherry flavor that matches with the cherry basin. And so they actually have this thing on the right side that looks like an abscess, and you can try to find it. And once you find it, the balloon is pretty pliable that you can actually puncture it and simulate an abscess, an IND drainage of some sort with a needle. And so this is another type that you can see on the right side. It's an image of the needle actually going through the balloon when it's filled with substance, so that, again, you can mimic the IND. And then people thought, well, abscess, that's small potatoes. I'm going to put stones in it and try to see if I can find gallbladders and see what it looks like. So with gallbladders, they can simulate, they literally just put pebbles inside a balloon that would simulate a gallbladder, and then fill it with fluid. And so that you can teach your residents or trainees that once you see something like stones, that you can cause a shadowing. And this is a great a way to demonstrate what shadowing will look like on the gallstones. And they just didn't stop there. They decided to make biliary sludge by putting sand in on the left side. And then so when patients move, the sand can actually move with it too, or the whole phantom will move. So this is actually a pretty good simulation for sludging that can be but it's mobile. And on the right side, what they did was to simulate wall thickening, they took the balloon and then they basically rolled it in an olive oil and they covered it with the Metamucil powder and to create some sort of like a gallbladder thickening. And then they buried that into the Jello concoction and then they were able to simulate a thickened gallbladder. So one of the things that people actually did was that they took Spam, not only Spam tasty, but in some ways for some people, but you can actually use it for soft tissue as well for like a makeshift phantom. So there are different types of Spam out there. So which one do you actually choose? There's a teriyaki, there's a black pepper. So the ones on the right side, they're a different type of, I guess, Spam that gives off a different texture. And so the reason people recommend Spam in some ways is because if you do, they form their own abscesses. I don't know if that's a good thing, but it actually simulates what an abscess will look like depending on, I guess, the fat content of the particular Spam that you choose from. So in this case, I would choose the one all the way on the right because it looks like it's pretty fatty there. And if you actually put some sort of a vascular type, like a simulation in there, then if you actually do a venopuncture and then you take it out from your needle, you withdraw your needle, it actually self-seals. So you can't really see the needle tracks. I know it's pretty creative here. So here's the self-formed abscess on the right side of your Spam that you can see. And this is done, I guess, close to a water bath. So they don't really put gel over it. They just put water and they use the water to conduct that sound wave. And you can actually hide things inside. I don't know what they did. I think it's like a paper clip of some sort. Oh, it's glass. So they put it in there and then so that you try to find where your foreign body is. So I guess this is a good one for some of you guys when you do your Sono Olympics to try to find different objects inside different things and you can hide stuff. And this is one of the options you can use. And so another thing that you can simulate a vessel is that they actually took a bubble tea straw. They filled it with gel to simulate the vessels and they embedded that into Spam. And one of my other favorite things to do, I like tofu better than Spam because I find it to be less greasy and it's easier to use. But tofu can also simulate as one of your phantoms. And right here, what they did was they used a Penrose. They put a chopstick through it and then they thread it through the Penrose and they fed that through the whole tofu and then remove the chopsticks, blew up some air, close it off, or you can put water in it and close each end off and it'll simulate like a vascular access phantom. And here on the B, the right side that you see the needle actually going in to do venipuncture. And so here again, it actually works quite well. I've done this a couple of times. Instead of the Penrose on the left side, they actually use those, the balloons that they use the balloon animals with, and it works just as well. So, so with tofu, it's pretty flexible. So here, if you want to simulate a thyroid, it's actually interesting how if you look at the image, the ultrasound image of the tofu, it actually does look kind of like thyroid and also looks very similar to what you would see maybe in a scrotal ultrasound. But we're not going to make a model for scrotal ultrasound unless somebody wants to be really creative about that. But with a thyroid, this is a good model for training in terms of trying to locate where you need to go for biopsies. And this is what this particular model is describing. And so along the lines of tofu, they liked it so much that they decided, somebody decided that they were going to simulate some pericardial fluid for pericardiocentesis practice. And so they took a block of tofu, they carved out the middle, and they made a cap out of it. They submerged it in water and put the cap back on the tofu, and then put a piece of like a reusable saran wrap type of thing over it. And then they're able to use the ultrasound for that. And this is what it looks like. It actually looks pretty good, I have to say. So you see the, I guess what we would call the pericardium, and then on the outside of with this fluid, with the makeshift fluid. And then on B, you actually see the needle going in to try to aspirate. And the good thing about this particular phantom is that it's completely reusable. So the images on the right side actually shows you what it looks like after multiple punctures. So the A is 25 punctures, and which looks a little bit different than 100 punctures later, but it's really not that much different. So actually looks pretty good, looks pretty sustainable for a short period of time for multiple puncture wounds. And so if you wanted to look what kidneys look like, somebody actually took, I think this is a pig kidney portion of it. And they got creative with the gloves, with the fingers of the gloves, and they made calyces with the dilated ureters, and then surrounded the whole thing with saran wrap. And then we're able to ultrasound it. Perhaps this is done under a water bath, or I can't really tell here. But and then so you can actually demonstrate dilated, I guess, ureters or calyces and whatnot. So it's very creative. And this is one of the papers that I actually reviewed some time ago. And when it was published, it was kind of interesting. Somebody wanted to create a phantom for a scalp. So took a bunch of coconuts. Not sure how they did this quite well, because every time I try to shatter a coconut, it's actually quite difficult for me to do so, just to get the rest of the meat out of my coconut. But they were able to do so and then make different fissures as well as a fontanelle. You can see from the image on the left side, and on the right side is when they glued everything all back together and tried to make also fracture lines. And this is what they came up with. So you need to somehow know how to ultrasound this and try to hide it in something so that people won't exactly know where to go. So they actually kind of have to find it. So then what they did was they take a bowl, immersed the coconut fragments inside after they glued it, and then they put rods, attached the rods onto the coconuts, and then they embed the entire thing in the Metamucil and gel concoction. And after it cools, it becomes, it looks like a giant lollipop, but when you take it out, that is the phantom that we use. And then on figure 5, you see at the bottom, then that's what it looks like. So you can't really tell where the fractures or the sutures or the fontanelle may be. So that's the whole point, is to encase it so that you can actually use it to practice. So these are some of the images for comparison. The one on the left is the coconut phantom, whereas the one on the right is the human sutures. So I think that's pretty good in terms of trying to look for different suture lines. And you can also mimic it as a fracture. So the phantom fracture on the left side versus a real human fracture, skull fracture on the right by ultrasound. So the fontanelle on the left from the phantom is similar to the ones a little bit aside from the Metamucil gel that you can see from the ones on the right. So I think overall they did a pretty good job in trying to create this particular phantom. So you can do the same thing with spine if you are practicing doing LPs. So what this looks like here is that they actually have a tube that's going down to the canal that can simulate some sort of a fluid. You can fill it with fluid, and then you can practice trying to find your openings based on your ultrasound image, and then go in and try to aspirate the fluid. So, and this is what it looks like. So people can just really go to town with this. I mean, at this point, you can just basically embed everything inside gel and then try to ultrasound it. And here they're trying to mimic also some sort of for pericardiocentesis as well. So what they did is they just embedded the entire skeletal rib cage model inside, and then enclose that in the gel, and then connect that with some sort of a fluid, you can see with the IV opening on the right side, and so that they can fill it with fluid, so that when they do practices for pericardiocentesis, they can actually withdraw some of the fluids. So as you can see here on the left side, they put a thin TheraBand skin over it, along with the drawn in nipples, as they indicate in their figure 4. And then they're able to take see where the pericardial sac is, and then on the left, on the ultrasound image, you can see where the needle actually comes in. So this is also another a good practice, I guess. I think if I want to be really creative, I would combine this with the tofu thing. So I would embed my rib, and then I would just stick the tofu thing with the nice pericardial fluid thing that you can see on previous images, and actually just try to do it that way, but it might be too much work. So other ways that you can do it, again, really just a simple water bath that you can use instead of putting everything in gel. But some people prefer the gel, and this is some of the images that they got. Okay, I mean, this is pretty extreme. If I'm going to do this, I might as well just do it on a real person. So I thought this was very creative. Can anybody guess what this is? What they're trying to do? I know I can't see any chats, but I'll let you think about it. So they're trying to simulate lung ultrasound. So the sponge part that you see, it's actually filled with fluid, and they put literally like a rack of rib over the sponge. And this is the image that they got. So you can see they're trying to mimic, here you have your pleural line, and then I think this is maybe a little bit better here. And the different layers that you can see here. On the right side, you can actually, it looks pretty good. It actually looks like a lung ultrasound. You have your pleural line, and you have your I guess your musculature, and from your subcutaneous, and you have your rib shadows. So the only thing that you really can't get is your A lines. But for the most part, this is actually pretty good, I'd say. On the left side, they try to do it with chicken breast, but I don't think it nearly works as well as with just a rack of ribs. So I thought this was also very creative. So what these people try to do, anybody guess? Can you think of it before I tell you? So this is, they're trying to do like an optic ultrasound with a ping pong ball. So they had something that they had gel at the bottom. They filled the syringe with water or fluid, and then they stabilized it, and they glued a ping pong ball onto the top, and they poured jelly, the rest of the metamucil and gelatin concoction onto the cup itself. And then so this is what it looks like. So you actually can't tell which one is which. And so it actually looks pretty good. The one on the left side, I believe, is the real ultrasound, and the one on the right is the model. So it actually looks pretty similar. And then some people, what they did was they took tendons and then insert it through another piece of meat, and then they try to use that to try to look for a nerve simulate for nerve, to find the nerve ultrasounds. So, and this is Rush University when they're trying to do their training. What they did was they took the game operations, and they grounded that. They basically hacked the game, and then they inserted the another electrical cord onto the ultrasound. So their phantom, their vascular access phantom, and then they buried something in it, so you can use one of the probe from the operations game to try to see if you can find the foreign body that's embedded in this gel. So once you touch it, it'll either zap, and then you can actually see the flash of the electrode that you see on the ultrasound, indicating that you actually touched whatever it is that they needed to touch to indicate that you've made contact. So now that we've gone through the whole phantom, what are some of the options that you can use if you actually run out of ultrasound gel? If you're not in a place where you have access to it, and they can be fairly expensive. Like this is a 0.25 liter, and it's already $16. So if you're at a resource limited environment, this may not be a good option for you. So you try to think of other ways what you can use. Water bath is definitely a cheap way to do it, but you can't submerge everything under a water bath for you to optimize your image. So some of the options that you can use, this is from the konjac root, is a glucosamine pure powder that you can just add water to it, and then it'll become your ultrasound gel. But the powder itself is not exactly the cheapest either. So we can, but the image that you can create is actually looks great. It looks like that you're just using a regular, the aquasonic gel that we normally use, and the image looks pretty good. The other thing that you can use is the guar gum gel. Again, you mix it with water, and people put salt in it because salt acts almost like a stabilizer. It'll last a little bit longer if you put some salt in it. And if you're also at an area where you have access to, I don't know, I think this is all any flour really, but the banana flour, the sorghum flour, and the cassava flour, they're fairly inexpensive at different markets. And then you can use that to make your ultrasound gel. And so I found this, I thought this was really interesting. It's almost a recipe on how you can make ultrasound gel alternatives. And so 8 parts of cassava root flour, 1 part of salt as a stabilizer, and then 32 parts of water. You basically stir it all together, you boil it, and then you fill the your bottles when it's cooled. So, and this is the image that comes out of the cassava gel. It actually looks pretty similar to what you would have with using the other gels. So optimizing your soft tissue image. So now we're going to go move on to see what some of the other options that we use. I know we talked about the water bath technique already. Using the water as a way of conducting your sound wave to optimize your image. And so some examples, we probably don't need to spend so much time on here, is that it really centers your image to where your screen would be, that you would actually optimize your image in the middle of your screen. And then to really highlight some of the foreign body, abscess, or bone, or any other soft tissue or MSK that you have on your water, using your water bath technique. So these are some of just the examples. Okay. And another thing that you can use is just put lots and lots and lots of gel, and then really don't press down on it and use that gel to conduct that sound wave to really optimize your image as seen here. They do sell commercial pads that you can use to also mimic the same thing that you would as a loss of gel or a water bath. But these days, requires contact, and it's a one-time use, and it can be fairly expensive. They have different types that are out there. The ones that can conform onto the shape of your MSK, whatever that you're ultrasounding. But honestly, if I were to ultrasound this part of the body, I probably would just end up using a water bath. Okay, there's different things out there too. They have different sizes of these pads out there, but again, they can be costly, and it's really a one-time use. Okay. So one of the other things that we've tried is using the, so say this won't work so well on a hand because you can dip that in water, but say if you have something that's on the shoulder or something like that, you can't dip the entire thing under a water bath. So having a standoff pad using gloves can optimize your image. So basically take a glove, you fill it with water and try to get as much air out. I've learned this the very hard way, and don't put too much water in there, because if it's too much water, then you can't really get to where you need to go because your balloon is so big. So the image on the left side is probably a little bit better, the amount of water that you put in, and just try to get as much air as you can, or else you're going to be ultrasounding air. That'll get in your way of your object. And I've also tried it with the IV bag. Can't say that this works nearly as well. You have to get some fluid out in order to optimize that image, but I just better off using the gloves. So one of the things that we've also tried is, we read somewhere that if you can ultrasound basically almost like a 360 kind of a thing, if you have access to your entire limb or the entire body part, but partly using the technology that you would for a water bath. So one of the things that you can do is you can take a canister that you have in your hospital, or take a 2-liter bottle, and just basically stick your entire hand in there, or whatever that you need to ultrasound. And so here's an example of fingers, and then using this. And the advantage of this particular technique is that you can actually go all the way around at say if you part of a hand without having to flip over, because sometimes it's really difficult for a water bath that you do the dorsal as well as the ventral part of the hand, whereas here you can just do the entire hand with one sweep. So any questions on this so far?
No, it's very informative. Thanks, Ee.
Okay.
Well, I have a question
yeah.
about the homemade gels.
Yeah.
Do you know if that might invalidate the warranty? If I make my own gel, I mean, do you need to use a commercial gel for to be covered?
Oh, you mean, and for your ultrasound probe, you mean?
Right.
You know, I actually don't know. I do know that if you put it over spam, I mean, it's an infectious thing and it'll ruin it. I think if it's over time, but I don't know about that in terms of a warranty. Like if you do the cassava flour, I don't know. But that's an interesting question. I'm going to find out, actually. So, okay, anything else before I move on? Okay, well, we have lots of time for questions. Okay, so this is my attempt. So here I am, I'm buying Trader Joe organic tofu and then some lunch meat from across the street from H Mart because the regular spam is too expensive. So, and then what I did was I took a Penrose from work, I stuck a piece of wooden chopstick through it. This actually took me like half an hour. It was really hard. And then once I stick it through, I had to somehow fill it with water and then not have it spill out on the other side and tie it from the other side. It was actually quite challenging, but I managed to do it, this whole thing. So you can see on the right image there's a chopsticks going through it, and then you have to somehow thread that balloon, the Penrose on the other side, and then you take up the chopstick and then fill in the balloon for the tofu. Okay. And I did the same thing with spam. The great thing about spam is that once you put the thing over it, especially your bubble tea straw, you have to suck out the meat on the other side, and that requires you to actually literally suck it out. So, and then I just immerse that whole thing into the water bath. So, let's stop. I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I'm going to, let's see, share what I have. Okay, so okay, so what I have now, I don't know, this is gonna work. I wish I had a camera. Can you see what I have here?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so here's my tofu. And then what I did was here's my, went downstairs and got a bubble tea straw, and I stuck it in there because I didn't want to do the Penrose thing again because that was really hard. And then we're going to see if this actually works for you. So I have my handy Lumify. So I think this may require me to turn off the light. Hold on 1 second. Okay, you're still with me? Okay, so can you guys, oh geez. Let me see. I'm trying to not reflect from the computer, but can you see my image for the most part? Okay, sort of, maybe. Okay. How do I?
Yeah, maybe angle it away from your screen because we're getting a reflection. That's better. That's better.
Okay, I don't know how to make my screen just me. How do I do that? Speaker? No. Now I have Adam. Okay, I'll just do this. So is it, can you see okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And Antonio wanted to let you know that he wants you to create your own YouTube channel.
Right. Wait, who wants me to do this?
Antonio.
You can help me, Antonio. Okay, so where am I? I'm here. No, I'm here. Wait, okay. Oh, geez. Okay, so so here is my my bubble tea straw, and it's not compressible because it's really hard and rigid. But if it was a Penrose, it can be. So this is actually pretty good for tofu. So if you're trying to locate it, and I think I also stuck a paper clip in there somewhere that I hope I don't eat it later. Oh, here it is. So here's my. I think this is, oh, you know what? I can actually just do this on using a. I think this is my paper clip that I stuck in here. So that's my foreign body. And then if I want to turn this, oh man, like a horizontal, I can do it this way, like that. Okay, so so this is tofu. Next I have, oh man, okay. Spam. Don't tell the people at Lumify that I'm doing this, but okay. No, yay, nay, angle. Okay. How do I, okay, this. All right. So this is spam. And I'm trying to find my vein. Oh, here it is. Okay. So again, here's my vein, and I think I have a paper clip in here somewhere. It doesn't show up as well as the tofu, but I wanted to simulate. And I try to find like natural abscesses for this particular spam, but since this is a cheap knockoff spam, I thought there would be more abscesses, but there really wasn't. So if you're gonna do the abscess thing, just buy the fattier spam. But I think there were more abscesses in the tofu, but okay, anyway, I just wanted to just simulate that for all of you all, just for fun. And so, anybody have any questions? I mean, this is something that I think that we can, just for fun, that we can use. But it actually simulates for vascular access, especially if you use a Penrose or like a balloon, animal balloon that you inserted. So, okay. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions? I'm gonna look at the chat.
It's not exactly low tech, but I am curious if you ever worked with the ballistics gel, because I think the clips about like the skeletons immersed in the gel, I think was using that stuff.
Yeah, that's like that's too high tech for me. I'm the Metamucil like jelly girl, or in fact, I'm more like the tofu kind of a girl. But I've never tried that. Have you tried that? Does it work?
I haven't, but I've just seen it at some of the courses. But I think for some of the larger models, like the amount of effort involved in trying to make them, I think it might be worth paying that extra bucks for the gel. But I don't know. Has anybody else in this group ever worked with the ballistic stuff?
We do a fair bit of it down here with our primarily our adult group down at MUSC here in South Carolina. Have done like just ran our own Sono games for our residents and used it to bury a bunch of like letters from a like a fridge, a fridge magnet thing, and had people like spell stuff out, identify things, and have used it for larger LP models. We do some of our own reusable IV stuff. You can use it, chop it up again, and remelt it and pour it. You just have to have a big enough container to serve as your mold with whatever it is you want to bury in it.
And how long does that last?
The ballistics gel will, I mean, I may have some sitting in my garage, unfortunately. it doesn't go. I mean, it's a more durable meat. I mean, it's not going to go really anywhere as far as like, going bad, like something that's Jello based potentially might be. Needle stick wise, I'm trying to think how often it will eventually start showing like tracks similar to any of them. It's not as good as your standard like fancy Blue Phantom, but it's a heck of a lot cheaper.
Or Spam, they sell seal supposedly. So yeah, I've never worked with them, but maybe that's something that you can use next time, Adam, for your the Atlantic City thing that you host. So.
Oh, I can't wait to do that again. Absolutely.
Oh, can we do that next time, and then we can use tofu and spam?
You're booked to your station already.
Right. Anybody else I can help you with? Any questions?
Yes, someone in the chat, Eric from Israel, was wondering if instead of the wooden chopsticks, metal chopsticks would work better to get penroses through either the tofu or the spam.
Okay, so I've tried that too, because what I have really at home was just regular chopsticks, and they're actually too thick for the penrose. It might work better for the balloon animals, but even then, they were stretching it too much, and then I couldn't get it passed through, and then it just didn't go. It didn't fit in the penrose because they were too thick. I didn't take into account of that. And then I can only fit a portion of it because the way that chopsticks work is actually, it's small on one end and thicker on the other end. So it just didn't work out. Like I found that the wood ones just worked better.
And someone said, how about, which one was it? Kneading needles instead of chopsticks?
Wait, I'm sorry, using needles to go through instead of chopsticks?
Knitting needles.
Knitting needles. I don't know, you have to use a pretty thin one. Maybe the crochet needles would work, but they're not long enough. But the knitting needles, you have to use a thin knitting needles. But again, with knitting needles, you run into the problem with one side of it being very thin and the other side being very thick. I don't know, but this is like a study. We should do this study, like which one actually gets through the tofu better with the penrose. But that's a good idea. I'll look into that.
I use tofu all the time and just shove like standard old up cooking skewers through it and just leave them in as the target. You obviously lose the ability to sort of have a cannulatable lumen, but when I'm teaching our nurses how to do IVs, we start with that because it's $4 and they can plow through and just do needle stick after needle stick and just continually hit the target, and they can actually get that tactile feel they hit the right spot. You might also, for threading, like you went to a hardware store, like a Home Depot has various size like wooden dowels that you can sort of just like take your penrose and figure out which one, and those would be a consistent diameter the whole way across. I think they're usually like 2 to 4 foot length, but like $1 for one of them.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe we should have our own YouTube channel, just me and you. I think this will be great. But yeah, I think the I didn't have the dowel. I thought that the chopsticks, the just wooden chopstick that you would have from a takeout, would be thin enough, but it really wasn't. Yeah. So I really appreciate all the ideas here. It just encourages me to want to make more phantom models. So anything else, anybody else I can help you with?
I was, this is a great talk. It's very informative. I was wondering if you had any resources as to like where to get all these hacks, because I feel like, I'm not sure if anyone knows of any website or any folks that has all these ideas there.
Yes, on my talk, there was actually a reference page that we just kind of blowed through. But what I can do is I'll send it to Henry, and then he can share it with everybody. So
that would be awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I can do.
And I'm curious to see what Lei actually posted here because I can't download this picture. So I'm afraid if I download, okay, let's see what happens when I download this picture. Oh yeah, okay. So here's a picture, I guess with your kids with the tofu models. So.
No, that was cheap spam in Rwanda.
I mean, sorry, spam, sorry.
Unfortunately, you can't tell on the outside. Some spams are filled with bubbles, which makes it challenging, but they look exactly the same. So we have to, we had to do quite a few different models with balloons and to try to figure out which ones were actually sound transmissible versus filled with micro abscesses using your vernacular. So anyway, yeah, we had a dog, so thankfully the spam was not wasted.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Ee. This was great. So yeah, I'll share that document once you share it with me. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay.
You too.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.